services today. On behalf of my mother, our father, myself, my sister, and the remainder of our families, we'd like to thank all of you for coming out today in celebration of Scott's life. Approximately 2 weeks ago, Scott took his own life, and his passing brought a lot of shock and grief and sadness to a lot of people's lives. The ultimate truth as to why he did this will forever remain a mystery, be unknown. Our purpose here today is to tell him in our way and to share with everybody the love that our family had for him, that his friends had for him, and to celebrate his life and not focus on the tragedy that brings us all together. In a few moments, you'll be hearing from a variety of different people, myself, my sister, other family members, his nieces and nephews, and we'll all try to share memories and thoughts about him that made him special to all of us. My brother was a generous and loving person, and it's appropriate that we remember that during this time. My brother and I shared a long and storied history together. Obviously, we were raised by two wonderful parents, and we shared the same time and space by being in the same bedroom. I was a slob, and he hated every moment of it. But my mother told me, ever since I was a young child, that I was always very protective of him, and I had to be. He was always and so looking at some of his pictures, I think the mischief that was in the making behind those eyes. Later on, we're going to have a video montage of him with various people and family and things like that, and you'll see that. And that's the thing about Scott, is just by looking at him, I think a lot of you remember him, and you would just have a smile on your face immediately because of the way he was, the type of human being that he was. When we were younger, I'm going to go back to when he was younger, he managed to electrocute himself with a bobby pin. He bit my hand when he was about 3 years old because he wanted to cross the street a little bit early and proceeded to get run over by a car. All of this not leaving a scratch on him. For those of you unfamiliar with my family or Scott's family in detail, we grew up in, my sister, my brother and I were indicative of the Rainbow Coalition. We came in shades, my brother being the darker skinned one, me being the white kid who wanted to be black. There was a moment in time in the South where we lived in North Carolina, and I remember people using racial epithets at my brother, and I used to think about the adversity that he had to deal with, and I wish that I could stand by him during those moments, you know, and I was young too, and I really didn't digest what all of that meant. But if there was a picture for resiliency in the dictionary, his face should have been there, because he overcame so much, you know, whether it was, like I said, physically or with things like discrimination. My father was in the military and he moved quite often, and I think all of you probably know that Scott was a social animal. He loved people, and he loved being around people. And I was thinking, trying to reminisce about what I was going to talk about here, and I was talking to my mother, and I always remember the time when just before the South, I was going into to my sister and brother, let's all meet in the play area and we'll have lunch together. So my sister and myself ended up in the play area, and we're meekly sitting there with our sandwiches, looking down and eating. And Scott wasn't there. Scott wasn't going to be at lunch. And he wasn't going to be at lunch in the future because he had an entourage of 7 people who he had just met, all vying for his attention, wanting to be around him. And he already had a nickname after, what, 3 hours of school. And I sat there in awe and envy of this moment, you know. And that's, in essence, who my brother was. This is the type of person that he was, that he carried on later on in his life. My brother was Mr. Popular. He entered into a room. People came to him to bask in all things Scott. His skin seemed to be ready to burst from all the energy and life that was inside of him. During the last years of his life, he became a champion of the environment and of health. And he became, in essence, not religious, but very spiritual. And that's one of the reasons why we chose to have this today here, to share in the beauty of this place, because it was reflective of him. Scott's greatest accomplishment ultimately was that he became a father, a loving father. And he had a son, Christian, that he loved dearly. And unfortunately, he didn't have, they moved away because he had separated. He didn't have an opportunity to see Christian all the time. But every time I spoke to him, he would Skype him, and he would keep in touch with him so that he could be a part of him. And hopefully, all of you can remember that part of him that made him such a wonderful human being. I know that everybody here misses him and loved him. I loved him. His mother and father and his sister loved him. I wish he was here, you know, so that I could just hug him or just hold his hand. But much like literature, there are great stories with tragic endings. But it's the body of the book that we cherish and celebrate. And so today, like a good book, hopefully we can sit back and remember the wonderful things about my brother. What accomplishments that he had. How fearless he was. For all his faults, he was a lovely person. And I'll miss him very much. At this point, I'd like to turn this over to my sister. I'd like to say a few words. And then we'll be bringing up people to share their thoughts about my brother.
Hi, everybody. I'm not as eloquent a speaker as my brother, so bear with me. I'm a lot more emotional, too. We're here to celebrate Scott's life and not mourn his passing. And what I want to say about my brother is I loved him dearly, and I know everyone here loved him dearly, and will miss him. But Scott lives. He lives on in all of us. And I just want to say that